The silence that fell over Manhattan's most elite restaurant could have shattered glass. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Silverware paused in mid-air. Every head turned toward the narrow space between linen-covered tables where something was happening no one expected. A 10-year-old boy with metal braces on his legs was trembling as he reached out his hand. His name was Lucas Johnson, and standing across from him was Diana Johnson, the only black waitress on shift that night. The restaurant's pianist had just begun a soft, jazzy melody, and in a moment of unfiltered innocence, Lucas had asked her to dance. "Sir, control your son," barked Manager Thornton, slicing through the quiet like a blade. "This is not a dance hall. Our staff are not here to entertain guests." At the head of the table, Dwayne Johnson, a billionaire investor with a reputation as cold as the glass towers bearing his name, tightened his jaw. It was the first time in 2 years he dared take Lucas out in public since the accident. That changed their lives forever. He regretted it instantly. "Lucas, sit down," he ordered, voice low but commanding. Diana stood frozen, her eyes darting between the manager, the billionaire, and the boy whose small hand still hung in the air, waiting. In her 5 years at this establishment, she had mastered the art of being invisible, especially to powerful men like Dwayne. "Mr. Thornton, my shift's over," she said, her voice even. She calmly removed her apron and folded it over her arm. And then, in front of every silent, watching patron, she did the unthinkable. She smiled and took Lucas's hand. "I can't dance in an apron," she added. Dwayne surged to his feet. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded. Diana met his gaze without flinching. "I'm accepting an invitation, sir." Lucas took a step forward. It wasn't graceful. His brace scraped against the polished floor, and every eye in the restaurant followed its every inch. But Diana didn't pull him along or guide his movement. She followed him, matched his awkward pace with grace. "She's getting fired tomorrow," someone at a nearby table whispered. Dwayne heard none of it. What he saw was his late wife, Elizabeth, dancing with their son in their living room years ago. "It's not about perfection," she had said. "It's about connection." And now Lucas's fear was melting into focus. Shame was giving way to pride. He wasn't being helped or corrected. He was leading. The manager leaned in toward Dwayne. "Sir, I assure you, this will never happen again. She'll be disciplined." But Dwayne didn't respond. He couldn't. All he could hear was the joy in Lucas's small smile. After 3 steps, Diana gently brought the boy back to the table. "Thank you for asking me," she said with the formal grace of a ballroom dancer. "It was an honor." She turned to leave, but Dwayne stopped her. "Wait," he said, his voice lower than before. "What's your full name?" "Diana Johnson," she replied. He nodded slowly, repeating it under his breath like a promise. Then from inside his tailored jacket, he pulled out a card and held it out. "My office, tomorrow, 10 a.m. The entire restaurant froze again. Diana took the card without expression, but her hand trembled. "Dad," Lucas asked, watching her walk away, "why did you do that?" The billionaire had no answer. Only a growing awareness that something profound had just happened. And, for the first time in years, it had nothing to do with money. Morning sunlight bounced off the gleaming marble walls of Montgomery Tower like it belonged to no one else. Diana Johnson stepped inside with quiet resolve, wearing her best outfit, an on-sale navy skirt and a crisp white blouse, clutching her worn leather purse like a shield. The air smelled of money. People in tailored suits brushed past her, their shoes clicking against polished floors, eyes barely acknowledging her presence. Most of them wore accessories that cost more than her rent. "I'm here to see Mr. Johnson," she told the receptionist, trying not to sound too uncertain. The woman gave her a once-over, her look sharp, clinical. A quick phone call later, she nodded. 18th floor. Miss Winters will meet you." The elevator was a glass cage that lifted Diana past floor after floor of people who would never know her name. As she ascended, she took a slow breath, not because she was afraid, but because people like her weren't supposed to be in places like this. But then again, Diana wasn't most people. Miss Winters was all posture and precision, her expression unreadable as she led Diana through mirrored hallways. The further they walked, the heavier the glances became, curious, skeptical, almost accusatory. A black woman walking confidently through executive offices. That alone was enough to stir whispers. "He had you fired, didn't he?" Winters said suddenly, without turning. "It happens. A powerful client snaps his fingers, and people like you disappear." Diana raised an eyebrow. "People like me?" Winters adjusted her glasses, unbothered. "Employees who forget their place." Diana didn't blink. And where exactly would that be? Before Winters could answer, her phone rang. "He'll see you now." Dwayne Johnson's office was half a floor of glass and clean lines, overlooking Manhattan as if the city belonged to him. He stood by the window, arms folded, watching the skyline like a general surveying his kingdom. "Mr. Johnson," Diana said, formal but not meek. Dwayne turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "Miss Johnson, thank you for coming. Please sit." The silence that followed wasn't accidental. It was a tactic, one Diana recognized from a lifetime of people trying to make her feel small. Let the silence stretch until they break, until they talk too much, confess too much, compromise. But Diana didn't flinch. She waited. "Do you have a background?" he asked finally. "Excuse me?" "Education. College." Her gaze held steady. "Bachelor's in Child Development from NYU. I started a master's in special education, but didn't finish." Something flickered behind his eyes. Interest, maybe. Surprise. "And yet, you're a waitress." "I work 3 jobs," Diana replied. "The restaurant, a bookstore on weekends, and tutoring when I can find clients." Dwayne walked over to the desk, picked up a folder. "I did some research, wanted to know more about the woman who danced with my son." He opened the folder. Inside were photos of children, a community center, a name, Freedom Steps. "You founded this 6 years ago." Diana sat up straighter. "I co-founded it with my sister Zoe. It's a dance and movement program for children with physical disabilities. It's about to close," he said, flipping a page. "No funding." "I didn't come here to ask for money," she replied firmly. "You invited me." He gave a dry, humorless chuckle. "Fair enough." Then, walking around the desk, he said something that caught her off guard. "I want you to work for me." "As a waitress in your home?" she asked, eyes narrowing. "As a therapeutic companion for Lucas," he said. His son's name caught in his throat like something too fragile to speak easily. His eyes drifted to a photo on the desk, his late wife Elizabeth holding baby Lucas. "I've hired the best specialists, neurologists, therapists, psychologists," he added. "But what you did yesterday, that was the first time I've seen him smile since the accident." Diana spoke softly. "It was just a dance, Mr. Johnson." "But it wasn't," he replied, voice cracking slightly. "I don't want someone to guide my son. I need someone who can follow." For the first time, Diana saw beyond the billionaire, the power, the ego, the suits. She saw a man who was drowning, a father trying and failing to reach his own child. "I'll pay you 5 times what you make now," he offered. Diana stood slowly. No, Dwayne Johnson wasn't used to hearing that word. No, especially not from someone he had just offered a small fortune. He blinked, unsure if he'd misheard her. "Excuse me?" he asked. Diana's voice didn't waver. "I don't work for people who see my color or my pay grade before they see my competence," she said calmly. "And I definitely don't work for people who try to buy their way out of emotional accountability." His expression darkened. "You're turning down an offer that could erase your financial struggles. Why? Out of pride?" "No," Diana said, stepping toward the door. out of dignity, and because your son deserves more than someone paid to pretend they care." Before she left, she paused, pulled a business card from her worn purse, and placed it on the sleek glass table. "Freedom Steps. Classes are Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 o'clock. If you ever want to bring Lucas, the first class is free." She didn't look back as she walked out of the office, but someone was watching. Miss Winters stood just outside, clearly having overheard the entire conversation. "You just turned down Dwayne Johnson," she whispered, stunned. "Are you insane?" Diana didn't answer directly. She just smiled and said, "Maybe, but I'd rather be crazy than be someone's property." The following Wednesday, Diana was at the front desk of the Freedom Steps Community Center, an aging, converted warehouse filled with handmade posters and loud music, when her sister Zoe rushed in, breathless and wide-eyed. "There's a Bentley outside," she whispered, "and you won't believe who's in it." Diana walked to the window. Sure enough, the car gleamed like it didn't belong in this neighborhood. In the back seat was Lucas, peering out the window, nervous but eager. In the front, behind the wheel, sat Dwayne Johnson, his hands gripped the steering wheel like he was bracing for battle. "He's not coming in," Zoe said. "Men like him don't step into places like this." But Diana smiled softly. "Don't underestimate a determined son." As they watched, the car door opened. Lucas stepped out slowly, adjusting his leg braces, and then, against all odds, Dwayne Johnson followed. He wore casual pants and a sweater, clearly trying to look normal, but everything about him still screamed billionaire. "I told you he'd come," Diana whispered, more to herself than to Zoe. Zoe gave her a look. "What did you do?" Diana didn't answer, but there was a quiet sparkle in her eyes. What no one knew, not even Zoe, was that under Diana's bed at home sat a notebook. It was filled with years of research, observations, and dreams about helping kids like Lucas. Everything she'd learned, every hardship she'd survived, every dance class she'd taught, had led to this exact moment. What Dwayne Johnson didn't know was that the waitress who dared to accept a dance invitation from his disabled son wasn't just a kind stranger. She was a woman with a plan, a mission, and his empire of coldness and control was about to collide headfirst with something it had never faced before, a revolution born from empathy. Freedom Steps didn't look like much from the outside. Just a weathered old warehouse, wedged between a discount furniture store and a car repair shop. But inside, it pulsed with energy. Kids in wheelchairs spun in wide circles. Others with prosthetics or walkers explored movement like it was a secret, language only they could speak. Hand-painted posters on the walls read things like "Your rhythm, your rules," and "Every move counts." When Dwayne Johnson and Lucas stepped through the doors, the music softened but didn't stop. Diana greeted them at the entrance, wearing a simple Freedom Steps t-shirt and sneakers. "Welcome," she said warmly, as if they were old friends. Not a billionaire and his hesitant son. Lucas stared at the room in wonder, his eyes locked on a girl twirling in a wheelchair like it was a stage. A boy with a prosthetic leg was hopping to the beat, laughing with every misstep. "It looks chaotic," Dwayne muttered, visibly uncomfortable. "There's structure," Diana replied, "just not the kind you're used to." She knelt down beside Lucas. "Want to try?" The boy looked up at his father for approval. Dwayne paused. "Go on," he said, forcing the words out. "I'll be right here." As Diana led Lucas into the group, Zoe approached Dwayne with a folding chair. "First day's always hardest," she said, offering him a seat. "For the parents, not the kids." Dwayne nodded stiffly. "This isn't therapy," he said. "I've hired the best rehab specialists in the country." "And how's that been working out for Lucas?" Zoe asked gently. Before he could answer, the door opened and an older woman entered. Her hair was in elegant grey braids, and she walked with an ornate cane, each step measured but powerful. The room seemed to quiet a bit as she made her way in. "Dr. Elaine Mercer," Zoe whispered. "Neuroscientist, retired from Harvard. She runs the research program behind this." Dr. Mercer made her way to the children, greeting them one by one, then turned to Dwayne. "Mr. Johnson, we've never met, but you've rejected my research proposals 3 times in the last 2 years. He blinked. "Dr. Mercer, I didn't expect you here. I oversee the methodology behind Freedom Steps," she said matter-of-factly. "We're researching how non-directive movement affects brain reconfiguration in kids with motor challenges." Dwayne frowned. "I thought this was just a dance class." Diana returned just in time to hear that. "It's a pilot rehabilitation program, actually," she said. "We combine dance with neuroscience. We give the kids autonomy in their movement, which triggers adaptive pathways." "But you work as a waitress?" he asked, confused. "Because we're underfunded," she said, "and because people like you rejected us." Then the realization hit. "You were Dr. Mercer's assistant." "Co-author," Mercer corrected him. Dwayne turned to Diana slowly. "You knew who I was when I walked into that restaurant, didn't you?" "I did," she said. "And when Lucas asked me to dance, I saw a chance to show you what your money had ignored." "Was it staged?" he asked, almost pleading. "No," she answered without hesitation. "Lucas got up on his own. I just chose to follow." Before Dwayne could respond, a group of reporters entered the studio. His body stiffened immediately. "What is this?" "Part 2 of the plan," Diana said calmly. Zoe handed him a copy of an article just published that morning. "We released our first research findings today. You used my son for a publicity stunt?" His voice was ice, but Diana led him to a wall filled with photos of children, each one labeled with personal progress notes. The last frame was empty. "What's that for?" he asked. "Our future," she said. "A fully funded center. 500 kids instead of 50. If you'd just read the proposal we sent months ago, none of this would have been necessary." "Diana," Zoe interrupted, her voice sharp with urgency. "It's Lucas." They turned quickly toward the center of the room. The music had stopped. A hush had fallen over the children. Lucas stood at the center of the floor, surrounded by curious eyes. His braces clanked slightly as he adjusted them, but something was different. One of them had been removed. Everyone froze. The room seemed to hold its breath as the boy, visibly trembling, tried to balance on just one leg brace. Dwayne instinctively moved forward, his protective instincts flaring, but Diana stopped him with a gentle hand on his arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Watch." Lucas exhaled slowly, focused. Then with visible effort and fierce concentration, he took a step, not guided, not assisted, a small, wobbly, imperfect step, entirely his. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then it exploded. The children cheered. Instructors clapped. Camera. Flashes went off like fireworks, but all Dwayne could hear was the thudding in his chest and the sudden burning behind his eyes. Diana stepped beside him, her voice soft and reverent. "That's why we created Freedom Steps. It's not about perfect steps. It's about first steps, on your own." Dwayne watched his son with new eyes, not as a burden, not as a case file, but as a whole human being, unlocking a piece of himself the world had been too impatient to see. In that moment, Lucas wasn't weak. He was powerful, not because of what he overcame, but because he had the courage to try, in front of everyone, on his terms. "This could have been done differently," Dwayne said quietly, almost bitterly. "Without manipulating me, without dragging the press into it." Diana nodded. "It could have, if you'd read our proposals, if you'd returned our calls. But you didn't, and your son didn't have time to wait." Reporters were starting to close in now, murmuring questions, watching the scene unfold with the hunger of people sensing a story. Lucas, unaware of the growing political storm around him, kept practicing the motion, repeating the step with quiet joy and trembling pride. Then it happened. One of the reporters stepped forward. "Mr. Johnson," she said, holding out a recorder, "can you comment on your presence at Freedom Steps today? Is it true your foundation rejected this program multiple times?" The air changed. All eyes turned to Dwayne. He could feel the weight of the moment on his shoulders, every camera lens, every skeptical whisper, every judgment waiting to be handed down. He looked at his son. Then he looked at Diana. Her expression wasn't smug. It was steady, compassionate, certain, and something in him broke. "You know what's hardest for someone like me?" Dwayne's voice was loud enough for everyone to hear now. "Admitting when we're wrong." The room went dead silent. He turned toward the reporter. "The Montgomery Foundation is proud to announce full funding for Freedom Steps, 5 years minimum, and will build a permanent rehabilitation center based on the methodology developed by Dr. Mercer and Ms. Johnson." A flash storm erupted. Across the room, cameras clicked, voices buzzed. Zoe let out a surprised gasp, but Dwayne held up a hand. "One condition," he added, "that Ms. Johnson retains full autonomy, no corporate interference." Diana didn't speak, but the emotion in her eyes said everything. 3 months later, bulldozers roared across the once-abandoned lot that would become the new Freedom Steps Rehabilitation Center. It wasn't the most luxurious project the Montgomery Foundation had ever funded, but it was the most personal. Every detail, from room layouts to equipment design, was shaped with direct input from the children and families it would serve. And Diana Johnson was there almost every day, clipboard in hand, guiding the construction not like a foreman, but like someone building a dream with bare hands. Lucas showed up often too. Not just as Dwayne Johnson's son, but as an ambassador. He greeted workers, asked questions, and even helped paint colorful signs for the lobby. Some days he brought other children along, kids who had once been too afraid to move, now curious and eager to be part of something bigger than their fears. What shocked people the most, though, was seeing Dwayne there. Not with press or bodyguards, but alone. Quiet, observing. Sometimes he just stood at a distance, watching his son interact with the world, as if trying to understand a new language. Other times he sat with Diana and reviewed blueprints, asking questions with surprising humility. "I never thought you'd actually show up for board meetings," Diana remarked one afternoon, raising an eyebrow as they stood over a table filled with diagrams and notes. "I never thought I'd be reading papers on neuroplasticity at 53, Dwayne replied, rubbing his temples, where sticky notes clung to a well-worn research article. She tilted her head. "So, this is part of your public penance, or do you actually care?" He looked at her, then away, then back again. "Lucas asked to have his second brace removed last week." "I know," she said. "He told me. His last physical therapist said that would be impossible for 2 more years. Diana smiled gently. "And you fired her, remember? Because you said she was wrong," he said. "She was." He picked up a photo from the table, a candid snapshot of Lucas balancing with just one crutch, smiling mid-step. "Why did you never accept my apology?" Dwayne asked, voice low. "Because you never gave one," Diana said simply. "Redirecting money, changing policies, funding our program, that's compensation, not an apology." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough." When the center finally opened, 6 months later, it was unlike anything the city had seen. There were no marble floors or gold plaques, but the building breathed with life. Its walls were wide, its colors bold, and its ceilings high, designed not to impress but to inspire. The main hall echoed with laughter and the rhythmic beat of movement. Children of all mobility levels danced, rolled, stepped, or simply watched, in comfort. And in the center of it all was Lucas. He now wore just one lightweight brace on his left leg. He led a short, choreographed routine with 3 other children. His motions weren't perfect, but they were his. Every beat was filled with intention, with joy. From the sidelines, Dwayne watched in silence. Not as a fixer, not as a billionaire, just as a father. He doesn't need you to hold him anymore, Diana said, stepping beside him. No, Dwayne nodded, but he still needs me to be around. That's the difference, isn't it? It's the biggest one, she said. A reporter stepped forward. Mr. Johnson, how does it feel to see your son's progress? Dwayne looked out at Lucas, who had now turned to help a younger girl find her balance. Proud, he said, not of what he's overcome, but of what he's created. And what's been your greatest lesson in all of this? Dwayne turned toward the camera, voice steady. That true leaders aren't the ones who guide everyone toward their version of the right path. They're the ones with the courage to follow when someone else shows them a better one. A year later, Freedom Steps wasn't just a local miracle. It had become a movement. The program expanded into 3 new cities, each site inspired by the same simple philosophy. Every child, regardless of ability, deserves the freedom to move at their own pace. The name Diana Johnson was no longer whispered with quiet doubt. It was spoken with respect across pediatric hospitals and educational institutions. She had just received the Pediatric Rehabilitation Innovation Award, an honor given to trailblazers redefining care through creativity and compassion, and Lucas. He was now a different child altogether. He still used a lightweight cane on difficult days, but more often than not, he moved freely, navigating school hallways like any other 10-year-old. He'd become a youth spokesperson for Freedom Steps, giving short speeches to other children, reminding them that progress wasn't about how fast you moved, but that you moved at all. Dwayne, meanwhile, learned to let go of control in places he never thought he would. He stepped back from boardrooms and leaned into playgrounds, therapy rooms, and community centers. The man who had once built an empire by mastering every variable now spent more time learning how to listen, especially to those with no titles, no resumes, no wealth, just truth. One afternoon, as a light rain danced against the windows of the newest Freedom Steps facility, Dwayne stood beside Diana. They were reviewing final approvals for a national curriculum adaptation of the program. She flipped through paperwork while he sipped lukewarm coffee in silence. I never thought a billion-dollar businessman would be signing off on sensory play guidelines, she joked lightly. He smirked. I never thought I'd be asking for your feedback on emotional development milestones. Diana looked at him, her gaze curious but kind. So, after everything, the funding, the recognition, the cameras, do you still think I used your son to prove a point? Dwayne paused, not defensively, not bitterly, but honestly. I think, he said carefully, you saw something I didn't, not just in Lucas, but in the system that failed kids like him, and you found a way to crack. It opened just wide enough for someone like me to see. She nodded, as if accepting an answer she already knew. And now, she asked. Now I see him, he said. Every part of him, not what I lost when he got injured, not what I hoped to fix, just who he is, who he's becoming. They turned as Lucas entered the room, holding hands with a younger boy. The child moved slowly, unsure, his posture guarded. Lucas whispered something to him, then adjusted his own pace, letting the boy lead. The scene mirrored that first dance between Diana and Lucas, except now Lucas was the one following and guiding at the same time. That right there, Diana whispered. That's the legacy. A reporter who'd been quietly preparing for a segment approached. Mr. Johnson, would you mind one final question for the national broadcast? Dwayne nodded. In one sentence, what's the greatest truth you've discovered on this journey? He didn't rush the answer. He looked at Lucas, then at Diana, and finally at the dozens of children across the room, each moving with freedom, not perfection. That true power, Dwayne said, isn't about being strong enough to lead. It's about being humble enough to follow. And in that moment it was clear. The billionaire who once measured success by control had finally understood that the most extraordinary steps in life are the ones you don't take alone. Sometimes the most powerful revolutions don't start with loud protests or public campaigns. They begin quietly, in a dimly lit restaurant with a child's trembling step and a woman brave enough to follow. Diana didn't just help a boy dance. She helped a man unlearn everything he thought made him powerful, and in that she reminded all of us, true strength isn't leading from the front. It's having the humility to follow when someone else shows you a better way. If this story moved you, made you feel more alive, more human, or just more aware of the invisible heroes around us, please don't scroll away in silence. Like this video if you believe every child deserves to lead. Share your thoughts in the comments. Has someone ever changed your life with a simple gesture? And subscribe for more true stories that restore your faith in humanity. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we start quiet revolutions.